Primary election day is Tuesday, June 4th. Now is the time to make a plan. Whether you plan to vote absentee by mail, in person at your county auditor's office before Election Day, or at your polling place on June 4th, it's important you take steps now to make your plan at voterready.iowa.gov. Remember, Election Day is Tuesday, June 4th. Find more info at voterready.iowa.gov. This message is presented by the Iowa Secretary of State.
So I got these wireless headphones. This is not an ad, or we're not getting paid to talk about these, but I am a 37-year-old who is very technologically savvy, and I spend all day long looking at screens and doing tech stuff, and I've never once in my life yet, until now, had wireless headphones. I don't know why it never really came up. I'm not an Apple guy, and so I know that obviously AirPods are super big in the Apple community, but when I got my new Android phone, it came with a big store credit discount for Google, and I was shopping around in there, and I was like, oh, some little wireless buds. Let me go pick them up. And now I've had them for a day, and like, I can't believe how cool they are. I can't believe that like you can have stuff playing in your ear and also have the pass-through mode so that if other people are talking to you, you can listen to them and you don't have to take them out. Cool. And that's like if my phone's in my pocket and like I get a text message and I've got my earbuds in, then I can click on my earbud and it'll be like blah 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 and like say the text message to me. I find that to be very tech forward and 2024, and it's a lot of fun.
I myself prefer wired everything because the gamer in me, as a 37-year-old man, I gotta have something that's gonna have up to the millisecond, quad millisecond, whatever,
quad millisecond.
I just have to. I need a machine that's going to keep up with my lighting reflexes and speed, and that goes for my ears as well. Now, of course, as an Apple person, and not because I like Apple, but just because the rest of my family used it, and plans and other people paying for it and things like that, things of that nature. I do have to have wireless headphones, and that's fine. I mean, it's fine, but mine don't have any of the technology that you're talking about, and that could be because I have, wired headphones, which are noise canceling, which is a great feature, obviously. But the buds just don't do it for me because they just don't create the rich sound in your ear that an over-the-ear headphone produces. So over-the-ear, wired, for me, strong preference. I'll never change. Welcome in to It's Always Sunny in Cheese Kingdom. I'm Austin on a Friday before Memorial Day weekend. Find me on Twitter, Real Bird Lawyer. Here with me, as always, my co-host Taylor at Taylor_Witt on Twitter. What's going on, buddy?
Not much. You have done a great job. You have got out the blue sky from the intro, and now you've got out the Twitter/X. You've done everything I've asked you as a co-host, and I appreciate your efforts.
You have really cleaned it up, but now the intro is so short. I don't know what to do with my hands. I will say brought to you by Fansided. Still trying to figure out where to work that one in there, but we are brought to you by Fansided. Check out the other great Fansided podcast content on their network. They are helping us bring great episodes to you every week, which we have been bad about lately, but we are trying to get back to. This is 2 episodes, 2 weeks in a row. One episode of It's Always Sunny in Cheese Kingdom. That is a streak. Streak 2, 3, and it's maybe a little bit open to interpretation, but we're going to keep the streak going. We have 2 things to cover in this episode. We have news, and we have our offseason segment, the Next Great American Dynasty, where we are revisiting, recapping every playoff game in the Patrick Mahomes era. And because this week's episode is devoted to one of just 3 playoff losses in the Patrick Mahomes era, out of 18 playoff games, the very regrettable, gross, disgusting Tampa Super Bowl, we're going to do something a little bit unorthodox with the structure of the podcast. Are you familiar with the compliment sandwich?
I am familiar with it because you love it. I don't know if I'm familiar with it outside of talking to you, but boy, I know your compliment sandwich like the back of my hand.
It's interesting because I'm in the legal profession, and I don't feel like lawyers in general care much for compliment sandwiching. Like, we'll just, it's basically just good. You're getting the bad news first, and then you're getting the bad news second, and you're getting the bad news last.
Yeah,
And
it's
if
a
there's
bad
some
news
good news,
sandwich.
it's probably not making it into the sandwich, right? The good
Yeah.
news is I'm making it in there. Very frank, sometimes overly frank, we lawyers are. This is a concept I couldn't even trace to you where I became aware of this concept. I'm
Yeah.
sure, my wife is in education. I'm sure that's probably where I partly picked it up. But for those of you unfamiliar, we're going to start with some good news. That's some kind of the concept of a compliment sandwich is a little bit weird because the thing in the middle is the bad part, and usually that's the best part of the sandwich. I mean, nothing against bread. I love bread. But
Yeah, yeah.
usually what's between the bread,
The
like you're not
meat.
gonna have a bread sandwich,
No.
right? So
Oh man, that sounds pretty good though.
yeah, it does
I'd
bread
be into
sandwich.
that. I
But
love bread.
what's your favorite kind of bread? We've never talked about this on the
Or a
podcast.
wheat oat nut.
Interesting.
It's
Okay.
like a heavy grain, like a wheat. Not, I'll eat a white bread sandwich. It's not. I love carbs. I love bread. That's totally fine. But like if I'm making a sandwich at home and the loaves of bread that I buy are oat nut wheat, like
Is there any kind of bread that you don't like?
I like sourdough. I um like
Rye? You like rye?
I don't mind it. I definitely think it's probably on the lowest tier of my bread list, but I'm so obsessed with bread that even that is like if I had rye here, I'd still munch on it happily.
Rye is probably the only kind of like standard bread, excluding really strange types of bread that I'm not
Yeah.
familiar with and haven't tried and probably don't
Oh,
like.
yeah, it's fine. It's unique. It's
It's probably
definitely
like the
like
only one that I don't really care for. Yeah.
sure, that's fair.
Right. For me, it would be like and I think this is a chain, so we probably have one in northern Colorado where I live, but the Great Harvest Bread Company,
Yeah.
challah bread. I used to buy that when
Oh,
we
Hall
lived
is
together
great.
many years
Sure.
ago. Just slap some
Mm-hmm.
butter on there. Very high
Mm-hmm.
quality. In any case,
Yep, agreed.
returning to our regularly scheduled programming, we've got some good things first, and then we're going to cover the unpleasant things in the middle, and then we're going to end with more good things. So we will end on a sunny note, which is sort of how this podcast likes to do things. So I guess first, let's kick off. OTAs are here, so that means the team is back out there. They're in shorts. They're not doing anything that interesting, but it is still the first time we've seen the boys out there throwing the old pigskin around since the Super Bowl victory over the 49ers. The rookies are out there. Mahomes is out there throwing deep balls to Hollywood Brown. It's an exciting time, and this is really the last football. I put that in air quotes content, but this is, the closest thing we're going to get to football until training camp kicks off in about 2 months. So enjoy it while you can. Anything catching your eye out of OTAs?
Not really yet so far. I really like the mile markers that the offseason hits. I love when those happen.
Yes.
I just like to kind of have my internal clock for the NFL season update. And this is one of them. This is just one of those. All right. Mahomes is throwing footballs. And that's something that always makes I just sleep a little bit better at night knowing that that's happening somewhere. So I'm really excited for that.
Let's go out and hit some of the highlights here. And I'm actually going to start. I'm going off script here. I didn't put this in the program, but I
Uh-oh.
did just think of it. Did you see
Okay.
the dad bod Mahomes pick? Him coming out of the
No.
facility the
Oh,
other
I
day?
did. Oh, yeah. I did. Little
Well,
punky.
it sort of went a little bit viral because somebody, of course, said, if Tua showed up like this, he'd be getting absolutely roasted. And the joke there is sort of multifaceted. I had to kind of,
Yes.
do a little bit of research to understand, obviously this is a joke. It's meant to provoke engagement. That's, one of the things that's very distasteful about Twitter these days is that, people can get paid for their bad takes and their ill tweets, which is taking me a while to adjust to that because I just want to react and I just want to
clickbait tweets are
I just want to fall for it, hook, line, and sinker, and I just want to spend 2 hours of my day engaging with these people. But I don't want to do it if they're getting paid and I'm not. That's unsporting. It's not fair.
It's a sucker's bet.
It's not a good use of my time. In any case, he showed up looking a little flabby. But it's not news, whatever. It's May, and he's going to look how he looks, and he's going to win some more Super Bowls. So let's get into actual newsy items that are on my rundown on my script. Pat was on Pat McAfee, two Pats, one show. This week, he said, this year, I feel like we have a team that will throw the ball deep. I want to be that explosive offense we've seen in the past. Did this get you torqued up or what?
Yeah, it for sure. And it got McAfee super torqued up. He was like really excited to hear this. And I mean, honestly, everyone is. And it's a better product for the fan, for bigger plays, more explosive offense. I mean, that's what people like. That's what chicks dig the long ball. And I just think that with the speed additions with Worthy and Brown, how could you not be thinking like, okay, that's going to unlock this. That's going to unlock some deep stuff that we haven't been able to do since we were having a blast and, throwing the ball to Tyreek and stuff. So yes, I was very excited to hear this.
What I love about what you said is, you said, who wouldn't be excited about that? I mean,
Yeah,
you would think our opponents, the fans of the other 31 teams would
right.
be annoyed or upset or dreading this development. But even that, I kind of think might not quite be true because, I mean, so much of the way we consume the NFL, now, not us, we're hardcore fans of one team, but like if the Chiefs aren't playing or when the Chiefs are not playing, if red zone's on, I'm taking that option, checking on my fantasy players, my sports bets, my props, whatever. That is so ingrained in the culture of how we consume the NFL at this point that, like, you're kind of right. Like, unless your team is playing the Chiefs in that game and you're getting 80-yard bombs dropped on you to Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy and Patrick Mahomes is slinging the ball all over your defense, all over the yard and running up the score on you, I mean, you're probably into it. Like, like, it's hard to imagine anybody outside of the rooting interest of a single game not being into that whole concept. I'm very excited.
You know what I link that to kind of in my mind is the Rams, the greatest show on turf, which when I was watching that team, the Rams, now they didn't really clash with the Chiefs head to head, or it wasn't really like a division rival or anything like that. And I'm sure the Broncos and Raiders and Chargers are not excited about the Chiefs throwing bombs, but I loved watching the greatest show on turf. I loved watching good offense. I loved watching explosive plays. And I never thought like, well, I wish my team could do that. Or, I mean, I probably did, but like it wasn't a detriment to that. And I think that if a lot of teams around the league are used to watching kind of dinky dunk offenses, then they're probably, like, all right, let's check out on the Chiefs. Let's watch some Warriors basketball basically. And that's fun.
It's fantastic. Xavier Worthy, of course, was out there. He did tweak his hamstring. That is not supposed to be serious. They said that if this was an actual game, he would probably be playing. And, hamstring injuries are tough, obviously, but, hamstring injury in OTAs, I can't imagine that's going to keep him out of camp or, let alone the start of the season. You don't like seeing soft tissue injuries, but this is the best time to get one. You have now, like I said, I mean, essentially 2 months off from football where you don't have anything to do. Rest up, King. We're going to need you opening night. In rookie news, second-round pick Kingsley Suamataia is signed and competing with Wanya Morris for the starting left tackle job. Adam Teicher says that this is the only battle for starting job. Now, he did say in the article, normally I try not to click on that and support that because, he's a downer. He's a downer, but he did say in the article that they will be figuring out playing time in some other positions. So this is just, he was referring to every down starters. Does that surprise you at all that there's no other real positional battles going on?
Not, I would say, a surprise coming off of a Super Bowl win where you don't lose a ton of talent in free agency. Now, obviously, there were some key losses. I'm thinking mostly like linebacker with Willie Gay, Snead, of course, but there was really no position. I mean, I of both of those positions, you kind of see the hierarchy just step up one spot, and
right.
Like I guess if you wanted to say the starting cornerback between like Jalen Watson and Joshua Williams or something like that could make some sense. But no, I'm not really surprised that a team that was able to do what the Chiefs did last year don't have a ton of position battles this year. It is interesting, I guess, in a good way that Suamataia is like already, as a second round pick, you're invested fairly highly in him. He was a top 64 pick, and to make sure that everyone knows like, hey, we're like giving him a shot to contribute right away. That's great.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think everyone wanted to see. If he had stepped in and immediately just been like, nah, Wanya Morris is going to start there and we're going to develop him and he's going to be like a project player or whatever, I think that's a little annoying as a second round pick. But instead, it's like, no, they believe in him enough that they're giving him a shot to go win that job right away.
Yeah, I like it too because you may have seen that, over in Chicago in Bears territory, they asked Matt Eberflus about the quarterback competition, and he just basically said Caleb Williams is our week one starter. He's our guy. I mean, you just drafted him with the number one overall pick. Everybody knows he's going to be your starter. I mean, you're not going to play, I don't even know, Tyson Bagent, who even is still on that roster. It is kind of refreshing. I do feel like, the older school NFL guys, which obviously would include Andy Reid, are more prone to sort of that like fake competition kind of thing where it's like, well, he's got to earn a spot and blah, blah, blah. And they haven't handed him the starting job, but it is refreshing to at least get a little bit of validation there. You wrote, or is it? And that was responding to the only battle being for the starting left tackle job. Carson Wentz, absolutely killing it, per Travis Kelce, dicing it up every time he goes out there, throwing bombs, throwing lasers. He's got all the attributes, and you can see it when he's on the practice field for sure. I feel like you're trolling me here, but Carson Wentz, sure. Let's talk.
I just think it's funny or fun or however you want to put it to have a backup quarterback that you're not dreading if they have to come in the game in an emergency status. And look, I think the Chiefs have been sure. I think the Chiefs have been really lucky in that department in the entire Patrick Mahomes era. I think they've always had competent veteran backups that have been able to, and unfortunately for the Chiefs, more often than not, they've had to actually have a significant play or drive or so. But I love that Carson Wentz, who's a guy that while you would not want to sign up as a year-long starter for your team, and people have tried and it never worked out for any of them, but it did work out a little bit for the Eagles.
It could work for us.
It could work for us, but just to have the ceiling of a backup quarterback that like your star Hall of Fame tight end's like, yeah, dude, that dude slings it. Like that's fun. That's good to have, and I'm glad to see him in the quarterback room.
Yeah, I tweeted the other day that the whole Carson Wentz thing it's weird to me. Like I don't know.
I like that.
I don't know if it's because he was a former Washington Commander. Like that's sort of like maybe that's the trigger. It's not that he was a former Eagle or a former Ram or whatever, but like the fact that a Colt, that he completely forgot about that one, and that was like he was the starter the entire year.
Yeah.
But the whole he was a Commander thing is sort of weird to me. Not a whole lot of Commanders coming over to be Chiefs. Kendall Fuller's the first one that sort of jumps out to me. But anyway, in any case, it's sort of strange to see. I mean, he's just has had such a weird career arc where
7 games for them.
Yeah, I mean, like
just funny.
He was an MVP candidate. Nick Foles won the Super Bowl while he was sitting on the bench injured, and then he got run out of town by Jalen Hurts, and then he's bounced around, and now he's Patrick Mahomes' backup. But I agree that, like, on paper, assuming that he's not just a total jerk in the locker room, which I can't imagine that the Chiefs would have. I mean, I can't imagine that the Chiefs would have signed somebody like that without doing their due diligence. And certainly they know. I mean, they know, Ron Rivera, they know a lot of these guys in Philly that, I mean,
Carson Wentz has been around. You can't
Chris
hire
Ballard,
a guy like that.
Chris Ballard in Indy, they literally, like, all of these organizations that he's been with have very close ties to the Chiefs organizationally. So I can't imagine he'll be anything but a blessing, a bonus in that regard. So, I mean, compared to, the Henny Badger, compared to, I'm going to forget his name, the former Missouri quarterback that was our backup,
Blaine Gabbert.
Nailed it. Yeah. Blaine Gabbert, he certainly offers more upside there, theoretically. So I think it's an interesting little signing.
Primary Election Day is Tuesday, June 4th. Now is the time to make a plan. Whether you plan to vote absentee by mail, in person at your county auditor's office before Election Day, or at your polling place on June 4th, it's important you take steps now to make your plan at voterready.iowa.gov. Remember, Election Day is Tuesday, June 4th. Find more info at voterready.iowa.gov. This message is presented by the Iowa Secretary of State.
All right, so we got through the tasty bread, the good news. Now we got to shift into some of the bad news and then kind of the whole project that we're doing. Literally. So bad news. Rashee Rice allegedly punched a guy and was going to get charged with assault. And we didn't talk about this on the podcast, even though it happened like a month ago, because we were, sort of taking some time off, not by choice. People were getting sick. People had to cancel. We forgot. We were tired. We didn't want to do it. And we never talked about this on the podcast. So that's crazy. And maybe there will be some more news about this at the end of the pod.
Maybe.
Bad news over. Bad news over. Let's turn to the Next Great American Dynasty. As you all know, or if you don't know, if you're joining us for the first time, this is our off-season project. We like to do, every off-season, we kind of have to think of something to sort of keep our listeners' attention occupied during the lean summer months when there's no real football content going on. Unfortunately, the franchise has given us such rich content to consume that we can just dip into the deep, deep reserves of Chiefs-related content and sort of pull something out of that. So the Next Great American Dynasty is us revisiting, recapping every single playoff game in the Patrick Mahomes era. And 15 of those ended in wins, and 3 of those ended in losses. We literally, had we done this a month ago and we were on a regular schedule, we would have actually just skipped this game as like a gag. We were just going to come back, after a week, we were just going to skip to the first playoff game next season. The problem is we got kind of a little bit, we didn't do the Bills game for a couple of weeks when we were supposed to do it. And we couldn't skip the Bills game, which, as we discussed last week, was one of the best playoff games of the Patrick Mahomes era, maybe the best. And then, also skip this game. So here we are. It's the end of the 2020 season, the COVID year. The Chiefs finished with 14 wins, franchise record. They beat the Buffalo Bills in the AFC Championship game, absolutely trounced them. Blew them out after, a so-so second half where they were winning every game but not covering the spread. And they're on to the Super Bowl in Tampa for the first time ever, a Super Bowl team playing in its home stadium at, a third of capacity, because this was a weird season, COVID ravaging the countryside, chasing all the villagers down like an angry dragon, burning them to bits. And here we are. Here we were, and here we are again. So we're not going to do awards, obviously, because it'd just be, pretty much all trash men.
Yeah.
We're not going to do the MAC, more and accused cope. That's our system for losses, which we rarely have to employ. We're just going to kind of try and process our feelings with this game again as quickly and as quietly as we possibly can. And then we're just going to kind of move on. So let's start here. In your rewatch the game, whatever you were able to stomach, I don't know how much of the game that actually was. And we've been very open about the fact that we've never watched this game all the way through. I'll be upfront with you. I'm not going to tell you how much of it I rewatched, but I will tell you that I did not rewatch the entire game uninterrupted with my full attention. Is that doing our listeners a little bit of a disservice? Possibly. But you know what?
Not in this case.
Not in this case.
They don't want to hear any of the details.
Let me say to you, dear listener, you do not want to watch this game. You don't want to ever watch this game again. It will provide.
You don't even want to remember this game.
You don't even want to hear us talk about it. You really honestly should probably just fast forward. But we'll talk about it briefly so that we can discharge the duties that we set out for ourselves. I just don't want people in the comments, people in the reviews being like, oh, these guys just skipped a recap of the Super Bowl. We did that when this game happened. We didn't pod for like a month afterwards.
The haters are furious.
And when we came back, we did not address the game at all. So when you kind of came to the uncomfortable realization that we were going to talk about this game, what was it that came back first that really flooded your mind with dark, dangerous, evil thoughts?
Well, much like Molly in the background, who hears that we're talking about the Super Bowl and is really, really upset about it, my first thought was like, no, like I don't want to do it. I want to skip it. I don't even want to bring my mind to this place in time. You convinced me otherwise. Just kind of, hey, I think we probably need to do it. And we do, because there's an element of this that is almost like mourning, where like you need to get it off your chest. You need to just, talk about how it's making you feel and how it made you feel and try and get over it and all the stuff that goes with it. Because make no mistake about it, more than any other sports game in my entire life, this one hit the hardest. This was the worst loss I've ever experienced. And, as a KU fan, I've lost some national championships. And as a Royals fan, I've lost almost every game of every single season I've ever watched. And as a Chiefs fan before this, the Chiefs have had some devastating losses. Like this is a franchise that is not uncommon to end the year with just an absolute gut punch. But I think because of what was at stake here, it all comes down to Brady and Mahomes to me. That's the whole, everything that it had to do with this game is those two guys going head to head. If it were anyone else, any other team or whatever, or if Mahomes wasn't as good as he is, if his legacy wasn't, so had so much potential, then I just think this would have been we lost a championship. That sucks. Let's move on. Like, I think that, for example, the 2 Niners Super Bowl losses to the Chiefs, while I'm sure losing 2 Super Bowls in 4 years sucks, and like I'm sure they're really mad about it, it's not like Mahomes is preventing a Niners quarterback from becoming a GOAT by beating him. And that's where like this one That was the first thing that came back to my head. You said, what was the first thing you thought about? It's always about Mahomes for me. It's always about legacy. It's always about Brady and how lucky he is and how ridiculous his career has been and how insurmountable those 7 Super Bowls feel at times. Not always, but at times. And this was the end of this game was one of those times for sure.
Yeah, for me, it really was about, Brady Mahomes. But what is so frustrating about this game, and what I was so frustrated by revisiting it, is that it really wasn't about Brady Mahomes.
Right.
Like
the game wasn't.
Nothing about this game, the result, the outcome, the final score, nothing about it had anything to do with Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes played as well as he possibly could have under the circumstances. His receivers let him down. His offensive line let him down. His coaching let him down. And let's be honest, the referees let him down.
Yep.
So I'm not going to claim that he was perfect in this game, but he played fine. He played well enough. He certainly didn't. He wasn't the reason the Chiefs lost the Super Bowl.
He played heroically. He was awesome.
Far from it. He was probably, you'd have to probably get through 10 or 11 reasons before you get to Patrick's play. And then on the flip side, same deal. Same as it ever was for Tom Brady. Yeah. But he did nothing to win the Super Bowl. It just was, he got bailed out over and over in the first half when the game was still in doubt by Carl Cheffers, who is, let's be honest, since redeemed himself.
He's back in the good. He's back in the good graces.
Yeah, he's no longer excommunicado. But the way that this game was officiated was a nightmare, a disaster. And let's not forget, a huge outlier in terms of the way that Super Bowls are typically officiated. It's not, you don't, and we've seen that in other Chiefs Super Bowls, you just don't want it to be a flag fest. And the first half of this game, when the game was still in doubt, was a flag fest. And that kind of helped put the game out of reach. And then, of course, obviously the Tampa defense going against this depleted, backup offensive line, everybody playing out of position, that didn't help. But then on the flip side, Brady going against, this did give me, I will say, and we'll sort of shift into more silver linings mode here in a minute, but it did give me an appreciation for how the Chiefs defense has evolved under Spags, because even those early, even the Super Bowl winning defense the year before this, those early Spags defenses, gosh, those guys were so grabby. And you should never get called for that in the Super Bowl unless you're James Bradbury and you're
if you grab him.
Yeah, exactly right. If you're gonna grab them like that, but those defenses were just not nearly as technically sound as the units have been the last couple of years under Spags, and that's a credit to Dave Merritt and Steve Spagnuolo and all of the assistant coaches on that side of the ball for the Chiefs. And it's a credit to Brett Veach on the personnel side as well, bringing in some more talented players. But
100%.
Just to return to Tom Brady, it could have been anybody in this game, right? It couldn't have been the worst quarterback in the NFL, but it did not have to be Tom Brady, and it didn't have to be, it could have been Tom Brady at the end of his career. It could have been the worst version of Tom Brady, which it was. Or at least close to it, the one that played the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game and beat us in overtime. Same deal, going against Bob Sutton. It just was not a challenge for him.
No.
And
the Chiefs scored 9 points.
Yeah, it just is. It's so frustrating that, and we'll turn this into how this game has sort of redeemed itself. Not the game itself, but sort of how the legacy aspect of it has been redeemed. But what's frustrating about that is that this will always be seen as a referendum on Mahomes versus Brady, when it was literally the furthest possible thing from referendum on Mahomes versus Brady that a game where both of them played the entire game could possibly be. There were so many circumstances in this game that affected the outcome that had nothing to do with either quarterback. And that's always partly going to be the case because quarterbacks don't play against each other. But nothing about what either quarterback did in this game really impacted the final score that much. That is what really,
I agree. I do think that something that's helped this medicine go down a little bit, for lack of a better phrase, is that I strongly defend the idea in online arguments or what have you, that quarterbacks among all players on all football teams are I think you would agree with me, the number one influencer on a win or a loss, right? They touch the ball, they do everything there. So when people talk about QB wins with this kind of, jokey, like, okay, yeah, QB wins. I get it. Like, I understand where they're coming from because, yes, quarterbacks do not play against each other. And yes, quarterbacks don't do everything on the field. They can lose games while they're not even on the field. I get all that. But you have to kind of, you can't be hypocritical about it. You have to either believe that if you talk about a quarterback's win-loss record, it matters or it doesn't. It's one or the other. It can't sometimes matter and sometimes not. And so, yeah, I think that when I think about Brady and Mahomes in the playoffs and Brady being 2-0 against Mahomes, the side of my brain that's like, well, yeah, QB wins don't matter. Of course he's 2-0. He had a better team. He had a better defense. He had, he's going up against worse, all that stuff. That
he won a coin toss in overtime in the first matchup, right?
Right. And then, Mahomes does the same thing to Josh Allen and wins a coin toss. Right. And, so like it does cut both ways. And I think I'm pretty confident in the fact that if Mahomes and Brady had started their careers at the same time and been at the same level of experience every time they played, I think it would be, a battle for the ages, and it would look a lot like Manning and Brady did, frankly, where sometimes one guy gets him, sometimes the other, but you always think of them as peers. And the fact that Brady was seasoned, 20 years in the league, had a great defense, had been to offense. Had a great offense, had Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Gronk and AB, and had been to 9 Super Bowls in the past before he played Mahomes in the 10th one. Like, that matters. That matters in how he handles the game. That matters in how Mahomes handles the game. I mean, it's all wrapped up in that. So I do think that as I've seen Mahomes go on to win 2 more Super Bowls, as we'll talk about with why things are okay, I do kind of have a better perspective on like just their head-to-head and how I do think it matters that Brady won those games. I do.
Let me ask you this, because this is something that I was pondering when I was rewatching this game. If they played this game 10 times and everything is the same, so Britt Reed is the same, something that I'd sort of put out in my mind. Carl Cheffers is the same.
Yeah.
The Chiefs offensive line is the
Eric
same.
Fisher.
The game is still in Tampa,
right.
The team has home field advantage. How many times did the Chiefs win this game?
I think a pretty reasonable number here would be in the 3 to 4 range. I certainly don't think that it's over 5. I don't think it'd be more than half. I also certainly don't think it's 1 or 0 or anything extremely low. As you watch this game unfold, there are moments that momentum gets taken and given between the two teams. And in the case of the game we actually watched, definitely all given to Tampa Bay in the calls, in the turnovers, and in everything, how it all went down. That all kept going Tampa Bay's way. And that doesn't always have to be the case when these two teams lined up to play each other. I do think that Tampa had the much, much, much better defensive line compared to the offensive line of the Chiefs. And I think that would have presented problems in every game they played. But the Chiefs have overcome monstrous defensive lines to win big games and playoff games in the past. That's not to say that would be the only reason. And they've overcome great performances by quarterbacks, which they didn't have to overcome in this one. But, the 13 seconds game is a great example where you don't have to play perfect defense to win a playoff game. But, I think Tampa was the better team. I think they had more talent, and I think they showed that. But the other thing is the Chiefs dropped so many. They had down games from Hill and Kelsey. They had, obviously they could have come up. Tyreek Hill torched this team that same season. Absolutely one of the most single explosive wide receiver games that we've seen in Chiefs history. So if you could squint and see that game playing out exactly like that, he torched them down in Tampa on the road. I mean, that was a very similar. Everyone was talking about that game. But of course, as you pointed out earlier, Tampa played differently because of that game, because how absolutely vicious Tyreek Hill was on them. They played everything in front of them and then sent the defensive line and just kind of expected that to work out. It was a really nice game plan by Tampa, for sure. And if they execute that game plan in 10 games, I think 3 to 4 is kind of my gut feeling there. Where did you land?
Yeah, I think somewhere in that 2 to 4 range is where I landed as well. And I think I say all else being equal, that's sort of stripping out. So what we're allowing to change is essentially the things that are random, right? Not the
From
things that are
everything from
preordained.
kickoff.
So
right?
that includes, for instance, the Chiefs receivers dropping every single ball,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
sometimes the Chiefs DBs dropping the ball. And, I think even the officiating, I said Carl Cheffers is still Carl Cheffers, but I do think that, there's something to be said for the way that even Carl, and you could make the argument against Carl Cheffers. I mean, think about that despicable call against the Texans a couple years ago that essentially forced the Chiefs to play to the end of overtime against a terrible Houston Texans team. But I do think there's something to be said for, NFL referees are human, and I also think that there is I think this is true of every sport, but it's definitely true of the NFL. I think there's a game flow element sometimes to the way games are officiated, and it the officiating in this game. I mean, after half, when the Bucs were up big, this is a really cleanly officiated game. So I do think that there's a world in which the Chiefs receivers are not dropping the ball, and the Chiefs are scoring. Maybe they're not lighting up the scoreboard, but they're definitely scoring touchdowns, which is something that they did not do in the actual version of this game that happened in real life, in this universe, and this
they didn't score a touchdown in this
dimension.
game, Austin.
Yeah, I know it's ridiculous, and it feels hard to say. And there's only one or two other times that they haven't done that in the Mahomes era. I know that Titans game. Yep, where they got blown out 27-3.
I'll confirm, but I'm pretty sure that's the only one.
So I mean, if you strip away the things that are kind of random, the way that the ball bounces, whether it's off the ground or off of a receiver's hands, in this case, which happened a number of times in this game, too many times to count. I didn't want to keep a tally. There was a part of my brain that was like, we should count how many drops there are in this game, but I gave up. It wasn't a fun thing to track. And I will say, this is sort of like, I've never actually seen A Clockwork Orange, but it's like where, the guy's eyes are forced open or whatever. I was trying very hard not to do that.
You see?
It was like,
do you see? Yeah.
I didn't want to see. And
oh my God, the Denver game where they broke the streak 24-9. That's the three. Tampa, Tennessee, Denver.
That's crazy. Well, congratulations, Broncos. You got us once. So I think maybe two, 3 times the Chiefs win this game. Let's turn to, again, understanding this game in terms of what happened on the field and the way that the two quarterbacks played was in no way a referendum on Mahomes versus Brady.
Of course not.
We have to put ourselves back in. I mean, like, if you go back and listen to our preview episode for the Super Bowl, that's all it was. And we were as guilty of this as anybody. And, we incorporated an amazing Tom Brady roast, much better than the one that went up on Netflix. We just absolutely ripped that guy a new one. Both in his personal life, which, let's be honest, he had given us far less material back then.
Yeah.
Still did not lack for good material there, and his on-field play. But part of the reason we were so reticent to even talk about this game for weeks after it happened is because we thought it was over. This was it. This was the end of this battle. Like, there was no way that Mahomes was ever going to come back from this. Brady was always going to be the GOAT. I think I probably publicly acknowledged, whether on the podcast or on Twitter, in the week or two after the Super Bowl, that, the best we've got is number 2. You could be the second greatest player in NFL history at this point, but your ceiling is now capped out at the second best player. Do we still feel that way?
I think we very clearly know. You do have to acknowledge that Brady has what you would call the tiebreaker, right? That if all else being equal, which they won't end up being equal, but if Mahomes ended his career with the same career that Brady had, but Brady beat him twice in the playoffs, Brady's got the tiebreaker. That's essentially what this was. This was a tiebreaker. And if Mahomes can surpass Brady's achievements in a multitude of ways, not just the rings, but if he can perform better on the field throughout his career than Brady did, then I think this tiebreaker starts to become less relevant because Mahomes passes him entirely, if that's the case. And I think if we're all sitting here right now in May of 2024, thinking about the potential for Mahomes to outright pass Brady in career accomplishments, I think you'd be crazy to think that that's not on the table. Not to say that it's guaranteed or anything like that, but to think that there's no way that a guy that's just won 3 Super Bowls in 5 years and he's 28 can go on and do, unbelievable things to go to 8, 9, whatever, go win that many Super Bowls. That'd be crazy. You'd be nuts. So
You'd be crazy to bet against it. I mean,
you'd be crazy. You'd be crazy to bet against it. You would. And I think we've talked about this before, how if you said, okay, for the rest of Mahomes' career from this day on, let's say he plays till he's 40 years old, 12 more years. How many Super Bowls would it take in those 12 years for you to not consider it to be a disappointment?
right.
And I feel like it's 4.
Yeah.
I feel like that number, if he won 4 Super Bowls in the next 12 years, that means
that's
he
only
loses
one every
8.
3 years.
Exactly.
Right now he's winning one every 2 years. So
right. That's a step back, but it's not even a step back even in just the rate, but it's also thinking about just the standard he holds himself to, the organization he's in, the coaching and the talent and all that stuff around him, which will change over time. But I just think that if you keep that in perspective, then if he disappoints us and I mean, not disappoints us, but if he doesn't disappoint us, that means he wins 4 or 5 over the next 12 years, and he's right there with Brady.
I think what's interesting about this project, and obviously we're doing this on the backs of back-to-back Super Bowl championships, and them going for a three-peat, which has never been done. I think something that the possibility of Mahomes surpassing Brady with fewer rings is also something that I don't think I would have contemplated in 2020 when this game happened, technically 2021, February 2021. I don't think I could have contemplated the idea of Mahomes passing Brady without getting to 7 or more rings. Now, if he had gotten to 7, Brady would only have, if he had won this game, Brady would only have 6. So then, he gets to 6, he has the tiebreaker. But I don't think it would have ever entered my mind in 2021 when this game happened that there would be a way for Mahomes to surpass Brady as the GOAT without
this game. Yeah.
At least, without winning this game, number one, but number two, without surpassing or tying or surpassing his ring total. And what I mean by that is, we've talked about this pretty much every time Randy comes on the show.
Yeah.
But the ability of Patrick Mahomes to do things that not only have never been done, but that it would never even have occurred to me, right? It wouldn't have occurred to me in 2021 to say, well, maybe he only gets to 6 rings and Brady has 7, or maybe he only gets to 5, but he has a three-peat in there. And that's never been done, right? That's something that Brady never did. That accomplishment never really even entered my mind. And of course, the Chiefs were playing in their second of 2 Super Bowls in a row. They had a chance to go back to back, which Brady did do once. But the Chiefs have the opportunity to do something that Tom Brady never did. Mahomes has an opportunity to do something that Brady never did. And, with the changes to the schedule, for instance, he could be the first guy to win 17 games in a regular season or 18 games in a regular season. He could be the first player to have an undefeated season, that would be that length of games. The Dolphins only played 14 regular season games and I think 3 playoff games. So, the Patriots, the 19-0 Patriots, the 19-1 Patriots, they have, that's something that it hasn't happened yet. And, we conceive of it happening in 2020? Sure. But it feels, after what he's accomplished the last couple of years and to put himself where he is now in 2024, it feels like all of those things are in front of us and back on the table. And you're right. I mean, there's certainly, if you had asked me the week after this happened, is there any way for Mahomes to pass Brady having lost this game, surpass him as the greatest football player of all time? I would have said no. And now I say,
everybody else.
Sure. I mean, it's not only is it, I don't even want to say this, it's probable, but it's super possible.
Pretty good.
Feels really good.
Pretty good. Yeah.
Speaking of feeling pretty good, let's sort of close out this conversation, which so far has been less painful than I thought it was going to be. And I hope our listeners feel the same way. Let's put a little sunny spin on this black cloud of a loss. We're just going to kind of go back and forth here. Things that I took away from this game with the perspective of hindsight, with looking back this game 3 years in the rearview mirror with 2 more Super Bowl championships, including a back-to-back in there, makes it a little bit easier to stomach. But listen, I would never say, I've got to be upfront about this before we do the segment. I would never say that it's better that the Chiefs lost this game than if they won.
Right.
Obviously, it would have been better had they won this game, right? it's not really possible, even doing the weird butterfly effect stuff. I mean, if you really want to mess around with weird hypotheticals, it'd be like, well, if they win this game, maybe Mahomes retires because he beat Brady head to head. Like, whatever. We could play those little games and schemes, but
Yeah.
grounded in the real world and things that actually could have happened, there's just no way to explain this loss away. Like, the Chiefs are worse off historically for having lost this game. But that doesn't mean that everything about this game was terrible. So I'll kick us off. I mean, I think that it's crazy to me how much this game stuck out in their minds. And for me as a fan, it wasn't easy, but relatively speaking, I mean, I like memory hold this game, deep six this game from my memory almost immediately after it happened. I consumed no football content for weeks, if not months.
We didn't pod for like 3 weeks after it.
Pod for a significant period of time. I didn't go on Twitter for a long period of time. I muted a bunch of words that would have triggered me and unzipped me and brought me back. But Mahomes, Kelsey, Chris Jones, Andy Reid, they did not have the benefit of being able to, turn the game off, which is what we did, midway through the third quarter when we were watching this live. They were there and they played it and they experienced it and they got their asses kicked for 4 quarters and they lost the opportunity to go back to back. They lost the opportunity to beat Tom Brady in a Super Bowl and join the pantheon of Nick Foles and Eli Manning. It's, some of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. They missed out on all of that. And it was crazy to me after they won this one to really hear how much this game motivated them. And again, not saying that it was good the Chiefs lost this game, but gosh, this one meant a whole lot to the team. And it's crazy because we still have one more playoff loss to talk about during this project, and it comes the very next season. So it's not like you can even say, oh, look, they were so motivated, they turn around and won the Super Bowl the next year. They didn't. They lost in the playoffs again. But, the year after that, they won the Super Bowl, and the year after that, they won the Super Bowl again. And this loss certainly was a big motivating force for them there. So, hey, there you go.
Yeah, and we've brought up the parallel with the losing Game 7 of the World Series in 2014 to the 2015 Royals, and how, yeah, you wouldn't say like, oh, I would have rather lost the World Series so that we could go win another World Series the next year. Like that logic doesn't really play. You want to win the World Series when you get to it, and then let everything else play out how it will. But same idea here, where you're right. Nobody in their right mind should be thinking it's good that the Chiefs lost this Super Bowl. However, if you see how it impacted this team and motivated them, and again, especially the big guys, especially Kelsey and Mahomes, you do kind of convince yourself, whether it's correct or not, that like, okay, I mean, if you're going to lose a game, you at least better get motivated as highly as they did. And sure, maybe they still would have done every exact thing the exact same way that they did, win or lose after this. I mean, hell, the Chiefs won the Super Bowl in 2022 and they managed to go back in 23 and win it again. So it's not to say that you have to lose a Super Bowl in order to be good enough to win the next one. There's no requirement for winning a Super Bowl other than, and in fact,
most teams that lose the Super Bowl do not go back to the Super Bowl the next year and win it. So
yes, there is definitely a Super Bowl hangover involved there. And yeah, so I agree with you that I'm really happy to see how motivated they were. And you also, like they know how it feels to lose a Super Bowl, which means that the next 2 times they got back, they did their damnedest to make sure they didn't feel it again. So that's okay.
That's right. I got another one here. This one is a big one for me personally. I don't know how much it meant to the team, but I actually really appreciate, with the benefit of hindsight, how much this loss lulled all of our haters into a false sense of security, and especially Patriots fans and Brady fans, because I mean, really for certainly 2 years after this game, and really up until this February when the Chiefs won their third in 6 years with Mahomes as the starter. I mean, they thought it was over. We all thought it was over, and they were sure that it was over, and they knew that there was no possibility that Mahomes was ever going to catch Brady. They could tout his greatness till the end of time. They could always bring this game up. Like, this game would always be relevant to the conversation, and they would always have the trump card. And not only that, I mean, they would never even have occasion to play the trump card because the game the competition wouldn't be close. It would not be a close race. They wouldn't need the tiebreaker, right?
Yeah.
And boy, that sucks for them because here we are.
Things changed in a hurry.
Things did change in a hurry. And really, like, I don't know, for me, like, as a fan, and especially somebody who's terminally online and terminally talking trash and things of that nature. I mean, boy, you could not set it up if you have to lose a Super Bowl and, then have this nice little redemption arc. I mean, I prefer not to lose to Tom Brady, but
I hear you.
Boy, those 2 years following this, into the next season, losing the AFC Championship game to the Bengals, pretty rough. Mickey Mouse, failed dynasty, Mickey Mouse dynasty, win a real ring. You've only got one, like you're never going to win another one. Like all of those things that people were saying, it just set them up for the ultimate sort of disappointment in rope-a-dope. And now they're all crying in the streets, and they'll be crying until he retires with 8 rings on his finger and gets inducted into Canton. So good.
Yeah, so good. It's one thing to clown on people for something that they don't believe with all their heart. And what I mean by that is, like, if Mahomes had immediately hit the ground and won 3 Super Bowls in his first 3 years or something like that, as Brady was even still playing before he was retired, you would have had New England fans that would have been pissed off about it, and they would have been trying to argue that Mahomes was going to be the GOAT, but they wouldn't have believed it. They wouldn't have believed it in their heart. They wouldn't have been they wouldn't have been settled into them being correct forever, which once they settled into that, to then pull the rug out, exactly what you're saying,
so
rope-a-dope them, and to say, aha, you were down in the depths of your soul. You knew for a fact, for all time, that Brady was going to be the best player that ever played football. And now, after having believed that, now we're showing you that that's not going to be the case. I mean, that's as earth-shattering. I mean, that's ontological shock for them. That is the epitome of just complete 180 on how they felt about the whole sport and their whole lives, and everything that they've held true and dear to their hearts is wrong. So I love that a lot.
So good. Give me one. What do you got?
Well, everyone talks about I feel like using this as the Chiefs have gone to 4 or 5 Super Bowls now. So instead of using this game as a deal breaker in the dynasty, they just use it as like a footnote. It just changes slightly in what the Chiefs have talked about their accomplishments, but in a good way, because you have 2 statements. If they didn't go to this game, or if they did go to this game. If they did not go to this game, the Chiefs have won 3 out of the last 5 Super Bowls. And that's what you say about it, because that's what it would be. Now that they lost this game, now they've been to 4 out of the last 5, winning 3 of them. Now it's like, it adds another year in the last 5 where they still kicked ass. They might not have won the last game, but they got to the last game. So I just think it's funny to turn it on its head and use this as a detail for the dynasty, and not for just a slap in the face.
I love that. And you know what's so funny about that is, like, getting to the final game in any sport, but especially the Super Bowl, should be viewed as a great achievement. And it almost never is, because you lose the Super Bowl. Like, you lost, the other team won, they hoist the trophy at the end of the year, and, it's over. Like, the Bills getting to 4 straight Super Bowls, amazing accomplishment. No team has ever done that. Because they lost all 4, they are a laughingstock. And, pretty much any team that goes to the Super Bowl and loses, especially the way the Chiefs lost. I mean, they got blown out in this game. It wasn't competitive. That's almost never get to play that as a positive, even though objectively it is better than not making the playoffs. It's better than 30 other team results. It's better than losing in the AFC Championship game, right? It's better than every team except the team that beat you objectively. Yeah. But it isn't. It's so rarely viewed as such, except in this situation, where the Chiefs won 3 Super Bowls on either side of this Super Bowl loss. And now it does sort of become, at this point, really, it is just a nice little positive footnote. Like, you get to say, like, we won 4 pennants, 4 AFC titles.
4 conference title games.
4 conference title games, 4 conference title wins, and 3 championships, 3 world championships, 3 Super Bowl victories. So this is like maybe one of the only examples in sports of a team being able to wave a blowout Super Bowl loss is like a dub. It's a dub. It is a dub at this point, because it just adds to the majesty of, the dynasty.
Yeah. How about something that you'll hear the NBA crowd say a lot, which is that Mickey Mouse COVID championships don't count for LeBron in 2020 when he won with the Lakers in the bubble. So Mickey Mouse COVID championships also don't count for Tom Brady when he won in his home stadium with 24,000 people in attendance and the other team not having an offensive line. So,
I mean,
so
that seems
seems
pretty fair
pretty
to me.
reasonable. Yeah.
Let me hit you with another one, then we can close
Okay.
this out
Okay.
and put this game behind us forever. We'll never have to discuss it ever again. Uh, I kind of what I kind of enjoyed about this game, and I alluded to this whenever we were talking about the regular season Tampa game. It might have been last week or a few weeks ago. It was recently, but I don't know exactly. You know, what they kind of did after the first half of that game was switch over to more of this, cover two, play everything in front of us, two deep safeties. We're going to really try and slow down Tyreek. We're going to try and turn this offense into dink and dunk, and it's going to be boring and make it beat us. What I love about this game and rewatching it, I mean, that is very much how they played in this game. They had the luxury, of course, of being only, I mean, they didn't blitz at all in this game. Tampa, I don't think blitzed a single time. Unless I missed one or I'm misremembering. I mean, they didn't have to. They were getting outrageous pressure with 4 in this game. They were
Every play was a blitz.
Yeah, exactly. Effectively, it looked like it, but they were only rushing 4 guys. So what I kind of love about this is, I mean, even though the result of this game was obviously, I mean, it's not real. Like the game was ridiculous. That was such a mismatch in the trenches. I mean, you almost never see that level of mismatch in an NFL game, let alone a playoff game, let alone the biggest game of the year. But Tampa kind of, I don't want to say the blueprint, but I think other teams thought that this was the blueprint, and they looked at this game and they said, well, what if we just play cover two and we can take away Tyreek and we can force him to become, Alex Smith and check the ball down and throw everything underneath. If we could take away the explosive play, like what we can probably turn this Chiefs offense into something that, is manageable and isn't very good. And the league tried to do that. And it actually did kind of work, despite the fact that, we got a functioning offensive line in 2021 regular season, I should say.
Sure.
But then he just learned how to beat it. Like this was sort of the germ. It wasn't the first time that a team played a lot of cover two against the Chiefs, but like I feel like when people talk about the blueprint to beat the Chiefs, like this is what they were pointing to in 2021. They were like, look, this is the blueprint. This is how Tampa played in the Super Bowl. And I think that there were coaches in the league, defensive coordinators in the league, that probably did believe that to be true. And it did kind of work because the start of the 2021 season was gross. I mean, that was a really tough regular season. And, I mean, really until this last year, 2023, I mean, that was like the toughest, and it still probably is tougher than the 2023 regular season, although it's close. I mean, there were some bad games in both. But the point is, I mean, this game really was I feel like in some ways it turned Pat into a complete player. Everybody remembers the heroics from this game. And boy, I mean, if you want to watch highlights from this game so you can see, the sideways pass and everything like that, I still don't recommend it, but, I couldn't blame you for doing it. But this, I think, I think in some ways athletes' minds work differently from a normal person's mind. Like,
Definitely.
I think there's probably a part of Patrick Mahomes mentally that's able to say, this is the way they played me in this game. I need to learn how to beat this. And I need to figure out how to become Tom Brady. Like I need to be the guy on the other side who is making 0 flashy plays, but just put up 30 points on my defense and blew me out in the Super Bowl. And I think there's probably a way for him to now, if he's sitting there at night, lying awake, thinking about, his $1 billion and, his huge mansion and his 3 Super Bowl rings, whatever. It's probably pretty cool. He probably sleeps very well at night, I'm guessing.
Yeah, definitely.
But in the weeks after this, he's probably able to tell himself, I mean, he's probably able to separate the fact that he didn't have an offensive line. Like, I think the best athletes, and obviously we've reached the point where Patrick Mahomes is that, are able to take away excuses for themselves. And I think he's probably able to look at this game mentally and, like, for him, just say, look, we got beat. Like, I'm not going to blame the fact that I didn't have an offensive line or my head coach's son had gotten a DUI and almost killed a kid, the Friday before the Super Bowl, or, Carl Sheffer's called a record number of penalties in the first half against our team, or my receivers were dropping everything. I think he has the ability to look at this game and say, what did I do wrong and what can I do to get better and to fix it? And he did. And it took half a season, but then here we are in 2024, the most complete player in the league, the best player in NFL history. Pretty good.
Yeah, it's great. It's really funny how he's such a quick learner and he's such an intelligent guy that teams needed to throw everything at him because that's the only way to beat him. That you've got to give him something he hasn't seen before to try and beat him for that one game that matters a ton to you. But what it does is it's iron sharpening iron, and it makes him better for all time once you throw those new things at him. And the league probably would have been better off, if you think back on it, to not throw anything new at him until the games mattered the most, until Super Bowls, until playoff runs. And then you try and throw a curveball at him and see if he'll swing and miss and see if you can get him out of the playoffs. So the fact that this game was a brand new, I keep saying it wasn't brand new. He's played against cover 2 teams before, but he has, the game plan was so sophisticated and so good that it made him reevaluate his own approach, and certainly it made Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy at the time reevaluate how the Chiefs called offense, but it made him better for the long term. It meant so that no one else could ever throw that pitch at him ever again and get him to swing and miss. Like, it was such a level up for him that now, I keep using baseball analogies today, now his swing has no holes. Now he can go up to the plate, and whatever it is that a defensive coordinator, let's not forget also that he practices against Steve Spagnuolo. So that he's already thinking of every single thing that a defensive coordinator can think of to do to throw him off. And this was the last indication. Well, I guess like you alluded to, there's one more game that things just didn't really click. But this was just such a great example of taking one loss early to pick up a bunch of wins later on down the line.
I feel pretty good about this, and I feel like we've done a pretty good job of putting a sunny spin on this game. But as promised, compliment sandwich. Let's close this show with some good news. Rashee Rice, remember how he punched that guy in the face and he was probably going to get charged with felony assault? I got some great news, Taylor. The victim filed an affidavit with the police asking them not to press charges. Now, really quickly, our friend of the show, Seth Kaiser, we'll see if we can get him back on this summer when things are a little quieter, because he's got a lot of other things going on. Seth had a great tweet thread about this, explaining it from the perspective of a prosecutor. We're both prosecutors. He's the most famous prosecutor in Chiefs Kingdom, and I'm like a distant second. But if you want to go check that out, it's very good. I didn't take the time to post about it because his was very comprehensive. But very quickly, for our listeners who may not have seen it or who would prefer to hear it from me, and if you would, thank you. The police and ultimately the DA control what kind of charges are filed. Police arrest people. Then they submit their reports to the district attorney, the prosecutor. The prosecutor decides what charges are going to be filed. The prosecutor has the ultimate say over what charges are filed, what charges are dismissed, etc. So this whole lexicon of dropping charges, it's a misnomer. Victims or alleged victims, let's say alleged victims in this case, don't want to get sued or, whatever, have people come at me. Alleged victims, they don't have any real control over this process. They don't get to decide whether criminal charges are brought or not. Now, as a practical matter, a victim who is completely uncooperative with a criminal prosecution may persuade a prosecutor to care about it less and to drop the charges because they don't want to haul somebody into court that doesn't want to be there. And, at a certain point, it becomes more trouble than it's worth for the prosecutor. This gets really tricky in domestic violence cases because frequently domestic violence victims, being trapped in the cycle of violence, go through stages where they are afraid of their accuser or are back with their abuser and, don't want to move forward with the case. And, good prosecutors in that situation will power through that and give them resources to be able to see that case through successfully and see it prosecuted effectively. But most of the time, when a alleged victim is saying this was a misunderstanding and what happened here didn't actually happen, and please don't charge this person with a crime, most of the time that's going to carry a lot of weight with the DA. And in the rare occasions where that is not dispositive on the outcome of the case, charges, end up being filed in spite of all of that. I mean, this affidavit that's been submitted, that's going to be part of the record. If this ever went to trial, if they could find this guy to come in and testify, they'd say, look, this is initially what you told the police. He'd say, yeah, but look, this was all a misunderstanding. Here's my affidavit. Or, heck, if he changes his mind, 6 months from now and says, well, that was a lie. Good luck proving that in court, because now you've given 3 different statements and they're all different from each other. You can't prove anything. He's probably not going to get charged with a crime. The police said the investigation is ongoing. Josina Anderson reported the other day that people close to Rice have been told that the investigation is in fact closed. This is another weird sort of quirk of the criminal justice system, open investigation, closed investigation. That makes it sound so much more official than it actually is. Sure. The police may have internal procedures where they're like, we're not going to actively send people out to collect evidence on this case, but they could always, just open it right back up. It's not like, this is the end of this investigation. It can never take a new twist or turn, but it certainly sounds like he's not going to get charged. Will it matter to the NFL's disciplinary committee? Probably not. But, I'm going to update my prediction. I'm going to say it's 6 to 8 games. I'll give a range. And, hey, that's better than him being charged with felony for breaking somebody's jaw by punching him in the face. It's always sunny in Chiefs Kingdom. See you guys next week.
Primary Election Day is Tuesday, June 4th. Now is the time to make a plan. Whether you plan to vote absentee by mail, in person at your county auditor's office before Election Day, or at your polling place on June 4th, it's important you take steps now to make your plan at voterready.iowa.gov. Remember, Election Day is Tuesday, June 4th. Find more info at voterready.iowa.gov. This message is presented by the Iowa Secretary of State.